Hi, I'm Martin Jarvis, and once again I want to welcome you to listen. What's going on in the world? It's getting crazy. I think the worst thing for me is the concealing of truth, is that we don't really get to know what's going on, in that Middle East, and we have to go to other news sources from other nations to try to put together and piece together what's actually going on, because our government sure isn't telling us. And maybe for good reason. I mean, I understand warfare, and I understand you cannot, give out your war plans over unsecure lines, insecure, not secure lines and all. But seriously, though, that you can't really be publishing the things you're about to do, because But it seems to me that when you have situations like casualties, I believe it should be a requirement to begin to report those, to the people of that nation. Don't be hiding it out of embarrassment or out of political expediency. No, I think that people need to know. Because we're in a democracy today, and we're in a position where we have to determine whether this is the direction we want our nation to go in. But we can't make a valid determination if we don't know what's really going on. That's what I thought was very scary, but very good about the Vietnam War, was as you only had a few channels, Channel 7, 2, 22, and whatever. We didn't have too many channels on television, and every night, especially on Channel 7, Walter Cronkite, Morley Schaefer, and all those guys, we would see what was going on on the front in Vietnam. The Tet Offensive, I remember they were behind a wall and interviewing GIs as they were fighting the enemy. So we got to see what was really going on, and what came about from that type of news coverage was protest. The American people were fed up with it, and the primary reason we got out of Vietnam was because the people were not having it. This is not what we signed up for. But if we're in a situation where we're kept in the dark and not allowed to see what's actually going on by our nation, incursion into other nations, it's really not fair to the American people, because the American people need to have the choice they have the information to see what's actually going on, and the choice to determine, is this what we want our nation to go through? And it doesn't seem like we have that right now. We've got a lot of craziness going on. And see me, I love the military. I was military. My family, me, my sister, my little sister, my 3 older brothers, and my dad, the 5 of us, the 6 of us, we have 100 years of military service. And my father, he served in Korea. He served in World War II as a young man, a cannoneer. Left after the war was over as a warrant officer. Korea started. He rejoined. And then Vietnam, he didn't have to go. He volunteered, went to Vietnam. 2 brothers, Vietnam. One actually in Vietnam, stationed at Pleiku. Some of y'all heard of Pleiku. Another brother, he was in Thailand, a neighbor of Vietnam during the Vietnam conflict. But we were all willing. My sister was a medic in Desert Storm, stationed in Germany, taking care of the wounded troops as they'd fly them in off the battlefield. Another brother and I, we just happened to be peacetime in the 70s. So I love the military, and I was raised a military kid. I was raised on military bases. All my friends were military kids, wherever we lived. I was born in Los Angeles, and from there we moved to Germany, lived there 5 years, moved from Germany to Kansas while my father was in Vietnam, moved from Kansas to Maine, came from Maine to Ohio. So I was a military kid. All I knew was the military. All I knew was the base and the commissary. Having dinner at the NCO club every Sunday night. This was my life. And so I love the military. What is problematic is the civilian leadership, which I understand. It is sort of like to make sure we don't end up having some kind of coup and having the military running things like many countries. So we have civilian leadership, but you have to depend that your leadership is not going to be corrupt. And so all of my life, I've always encouraged young people to join the military. I always thought, young people should join the military. It's a good experience, and, serve your country and all that. But now I don't know if it's a good idea. You have to be able to trust the civilian leadership, and when you lose that confidence in the civilian leadership, man, it's like you cannot encourage folks to join the military. I love the military too much, and the people that I would send there, I would send out of concern for them that, yes, join the military, it'll be good for you, but I can't say that anymore. I think we really need to begin to question, we really need to begin to challenge. I know we've divided even this war we're in now with Iran and with Israel and all the chaos going on, and it's like the whole region is on fire, and now we have entered the fray, and some Americans have been killed, probably more than what they've been sharing with us. But we're sitting here on the precipice of something that could be terrible, the worst thing that we've ever been involved in. Because this is a different type of warfare. When you don't have people actually fighting face to face, like the Tet Offensive, like like Kherson and stuff, where people are actually seeing their enemy and shooting at the enemy and fighting the enemy in close quarters. I mean, it's a different type of warfare. And the potential is great. Just sending missiles after missiles after missiles. These guys are bombing these guys. These guys are bombing these. It reminds me of a Star Trek episode where the people had been fighting each other for so many years that they had come up with a way that they could preserve the architecture, they could preserve the buildings, they could preserve their societies, so they would have their battles with each other on the computer. So my computer showed I just bombed this city. So the city wasn't bombed, so the buildings were preserved. But then the agreement was, so you have 100 people that should have been in that building, so they just go ahead to the disintegration chamber and just kill themselves because they actually lost that many lives in this simulated program of war. And so it was their way of sanitizing war, of saving the building, saving the architecture, saving the actual aesthetics of the society in which they lived. But then people willingly going to the disintegration machine if the computer war game they were playing showed that they were killed. Very interesting. That would really, if people would agree to that, that would really be bad, because the wars would never end. But right now, these nations are decimating each other. Funny is in the name of religion. That's the funniest part. Well, not funny, but ironic. That religions, they should be loving, but they're killing because they want what the other has. They want land, or they want power. And it's a very, these battles have been going on for many, many years. And I think the problem is when we get involved, when the United States gets sucked into the mix. Kind of reminds me of Vietnam, where the French had been there for quite some time, fighting the Viet Minh, fighting the Viet Cong, the Viet Minh. And they lost. They were losing terribly until they, at one large battle, the last battle, a place called Binh Minh Phu, where the French were just decimated by the Vietnamese. Even so much, the commander of the French, in his humiliation, he killed himself. And the United States wanted France to stay there, because it was that whole domino effect. They felt if Vietnam fell, that all the other Asian nations would fall to communism and would be outnumbered, in such a way. But France laughed. They were leaving. They couldn't take it anymore. We were going to pay them millions of dollars just to stay there in Vietnam, but they said, now we're leaving. And so we took their place. That's about the time my father went to Vietnam. I believe it was in 1965, early on. And as we know the story, and we followed that story closely, my family did, because of our involvement there. My father got back around 66. I think one of my brothers went there in 67. The other brother went to Thailand, I believe it was around 69 or so. All that stuff. We were very heavily invested in that. All of us were. All of my friends, all of our parents, we were all military. And war is very demanding, not only on the military personnel, but on their families as well. And as it turned out, and this is in hindsight, we can look back now and recognize that we lost, we lost, killed in Vietnam, like about 55,000 people. And we probably killed over 1 million Vietnamese. I'm not even sure what the number is. But then we look back historically, honestly, we recognize that the whole Gulf of Tonkin, the whole reason we went there was a made-up idea. It didn't even really happen. And then we find out as we look further that we were on the wrong side in Vietnam. We were not on the side of the people. We claim that we want people to be able to determine their own destiny. Well, those people wanted communist rule. That's what they wanted. But no, we wanted something different for the people. And so we were not, when you look at the Viet Cong and we see all these movies of the conflicts between American soldiers and the Vietnamese were the good guys. And our soldiers were just being placed in a situation for political gain and you know, global strategy and all, but not for the will of the people. So we were not on the right side. And we knew, the leadership knew, the CIA knew, they all knew. It was fiction, it was made up. It was strategy, it was playing chess with the lives of American soldiers for political purposes. Now I want to share with, even back then though, I think I have more confidence even in the civilian leadership that their motivations were pro-America, anti-communist. So I don't really fault our side, the decision makers, so well, because the intention was to do well for America, for the United States, to keep us safe, that whole thing about communism versus democracy. But today, and all, it doesn't seem like it's all of that. We have situations going on in D.C. where people are being challenged as far as like the Epstein files and things that might be embarrassment or might even be criminal. And so it seems like some of these conflicts, the conflict might be made up simply to deflect from that. And so that's one thing, but when the American lives are put in jeopardy just to cover someone else's political and criminal antics, that's very, very problematic. And maybe it's because I'm the way I think. Maybe because I think, sort of not really that deep in certain ways, in that there is no one life that's more important than another life. So if this gentleman, say, committed a crime and trying to cover it up by creating a situation that may not have really existed, and 3 to 4 people die in place of him being called to the carpet, that's just not right. But I see that in regular life, when I see anyone that commits a murder or even theft, I'm thinking, your life is not more valuable than this person's life. How can you justify taking their life? Or even sacrificing their life for your comfort? It's just not right. Stealing the same. So we have to look at these things. So the things our nation is involved in, are they right? Are they made up and fictitious in order to cover something else up? We've done that historically. I think Bill Clinton got in some hot water over something, so we bombed a Libyan pill factory. This is what they do. They find something to deflect the attention off of them, and I believe that's pretty much what we're involved in now. But because of the political polarization between parties, we'll have an entire party supporting something that really shouldn't be going on at all anyway. And it'd be one thing if you were playing chess or playing checkers, but people are actually dying. It's just not right. Now take it a step further, okay? Now I go from maybe like a religious perspective, or simply a social and cultural perspective, how you reap what you sow, or what goes around comes around, chickens coming home to roost, or this thing called karma, whatever you want to call it, you can't do wrong and get away with it. And I think that's what we saw in Vietnam. That's what we saw in Iraq. Saddam Hussein didn't have weapons of mass destruction, but we went there anyway for that purpose, and then determined that, well, he was a bad guy anyway. God, that sounds awful familiar, We have a lot of bad guys in a lot of nations, including our own at times, But that's not justification. That's why it's against international law to simply kill the leader of a nation. But we applaud things that are not quite right, that are not quite legal, that are not moral at all. But there will be reaping And that's the hard part. That's the part that we really haven't grasped. I think it's because of the privilege of this nation. We talk about white privilege, but there's American privilege. We've just been the superpower. We've pretty much been who we wanted to be. We've never been challenged, never really been bombed. I know 9/11 but that's 3,000 people. Compared to the rest of the nations, we're still okay. We're still winning in that respect. But what goes around does in fact come around. Chickens do come home to roost. We do reap what we sow, and there is a thing called karma. We have to ensure that we're always doing the right thing, okay? Because when we're not, they don't turn out right. That Vietnam situation didn't turn out right. How many times have we seen us pulling out that helicopter over the embassy, people falling off the helicopter just trying to get out of that nation? You cannot do something that is not right and expect to prosper long term. Same thing with Iraq, man. We didn't win that. Same thing with Afghanistan. We didn't win that either. We left there, people dying, trying to hang on to airplanes just to get out of there. Now, World War II, that was honorable. I would say Korea was honorable as well. But we have to ensure that the conflicts that we attach ourselves to are honorable. And I think the biggest thing is when we're doing things that are not honorable, we don't see properly. And that's how you end up reaping what you sow. That's how chickens come home to roost. That's how things come back to get you. What goes around comes around. Because when you're walking and doing what you shouldn't be doing, you're not really seeing properly. You're just trying to get in there, do your thing, and get away with it. But if you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, you're going to miss some things. And even when we look back at these situations, like with Vietnam and like with Afghanistan and Iraq, the problem that we've had, aside from the morality issue, whether or not we should have been there or not, is the strategic issue. We have this habit of underestimating, our foe, okay? We thought we were going to be embraced by the Vietnamese if the particular president we wanted to become president became president, and that was a whole big mess, in and of itself. And as well the situation in Iraq, mission accomplished. Saddam Hussein, weapons of mass destruction. There were no weapons of mass, and I knew it. I remember sitting in a baseball game at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Ohio, watching my son play Little League Baseball on folding chairs. This lady was sitting next to me, this white lady, and she was real nice, a real terrific person. But we talked about it. This was the day before the invasion. And she knew that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. And I knew he didn't. Two honest people having a conversation, watching our kids play baseball. I believe our kids were on the same team and all. But we had totally different opinions on what was going on because she had bought into the political narrative that was presented before us. Me, as a black man in America, I am used to seeing and being accused of something that you didn't do. There are prisons full of black men that are sitting there having been accused of what they didn't do. There were lynchings of black men, murders of black men for being accused of things they didn't do. So when I look at a situation, I see it a little bit different than this white person does because of the experiences that I've had in this nation of being accused of what you know you didn't do. And that's what we saw with Saddam Hussein. And as it turned out, there were no weapons of mass destruction. And then the narrative changed to where he was just a bad guy. Now, that's not good enough. Because you saw what happened. We didn't win. So we walk out of Iraq now. How many American lives were lost? How many American lives have been changed drastically because of loss of life, loss of limb, loss of mind, PTSD, all this stuff that was not necessary. Because we were in there for a reason that didn't exist. And we didn't win. Afghanistan the same. I know there's this thing about bin Laden, and he was in, I believe, in Pakistan, and all this stuff going on. But the problem is when the leadership is doing things behind the scenes that they really shouldn't be doing, and even people dying, that real innocents that shouldn't be dying, you can't just write that off as collateral damage. You have to recognize that we reap what we sow. The chickens come home to roost. What goes around comes around. There is a thing called karma. We're not getting away with anything. And so we left Afghanistan all crazy. Going into Venezuela, we're sinking all these ships, people that might even be fishermen. It doesn't even make logistical sense of where they were and what they are being accused of doing. But we're so far up watching a drone attack or a missile attack, and all we see is the boat and explosion. We don't know what the truth is. The question is, the chicken's coming home to roost, or we reap what we sow, what goes around comes around. There's this thing called karma. We go into a nation and we capture the president of the nation and we claim because he was a bad guy. But then we recognize the oil situation there. And then we go back to remember, before Hugo Chavez, when our American companies owned the oil over there, and then Hugo Chavez kicked the American companies out, nationalized the oil, and it became the oil of that nation. We've been lusting after their oil all this time. It's good to be a student of history. We look at the situation with Fidel Castro and recognize he wasn't the villain. He was actually an attorney whose people were being prostituted, pimped by the United States government and JFK and Meyer Lansky mafia, Jewish mafia. And with the nightclubs and the gambling, while the people were living in abject poverty. And Fidel, an attorney, could have lived a comfortable middle-class life if he had just cooperated. Couldn't do it because his people were suffering and staged a rebellion, a revolt against the Batista, a very corrupt government, a puppet the United States has set in there. Had been a sergeant in the Cuban army, and now we set him in there as president because he would do our bidding. Somebody who wasn't qualified to be president. Sound familiar? I'm just saying. And that didn't fare well. A lot of people have bought into the villainization of Fidel Castro, but the way my mind works. If I Google Fidel Castro and Malcolm X, I see them. I see them having a conversation and laughing in Harlem when on his way to the UN to speak. And I recognize that at the same time our nation was villainizing Fidel Castro was the same time our nation was sicking dogs and water hoses on black people. And so the same people that were villainizing this man were the same people that were persecuting us. So this is the source of who we're going to believe that Fidel Castro was a villain. Sorry, but I can't do that. Because you have to always, if this is in life, in news, in relationships, always consider the source. Who is villainizing that man and who is persecuting us? Okay. And I believe wholeheartedly that the only reason Lyndon Johnson embraced Martin Luther King Jr. is because if he didn't, he'd be facing Stokely Carmichael and Malcolm X and some of these brothers over here. You got to remember that we had men that had been trained in weapons and explosives from World War II, trained in weapons and explosive and tactics in Korea, trained in weapons and explosives and tactics in Vietnam. And these guys were rallying behind Stokely, Malcolm, the Deacons for Self-Defense, SNCC, and many other groups, many other people. And it was a lot more easy for the United States government to embrace Martin Luther King, a black man who could take a punch. Didn't have to deal with these radical brothers making statements like the ballot or the bullet, okay? And so we just need to recognize that a leadership, a government could very well be corrupt, and we just have to be students of history and students of politics and understand what's going on to make sure, to ensure we're not on the wrong side. Because what has happened historically, not just with our nation, but with all nations, is that chickens do come home to roost. What goes around comes around. You reap what you sow, and there is a thing called karma. And nations that don't function properly don't last forever. Now I look at our nation, and because I love this nation, I've been here all my life, is that we have been in this balancing position of of doing good and reaping good and doing bad and reaping bad. You know, I'm scuba certified. And the one thing that you're supposed to do when you're in the water is achieve this thing called neutral buoyancy. That's so you don't rise if you don't want to, and you don't go low if you don't want to, but you could stay right at that same level and just swim around and enjoy yourself. And so this balance then, as it pertains to the sowing and reaping concept, is that we have done our share of evil in this world, but we've also done our share of good. We've helped the poor. We've been kind to the immigrants. We've even allowed them to work, and we have reaped the benefits from their labors as well. We have been generous overseas, generous with our neighbors who are not doing as well as we are, understanding the delicate balance of relationships between nations. And as we were charitable with those nations, we got to reap some of that positive buoyancy. And so even though we were negative to a lot of immigrants, a lot of black folks, a lot of people in this nation, we had a balance between we were reaping good and we were reaping evil. So we weren't sinking and we weren't, in nirvana. We were just right there. But in this particular political climate we've had recently in our nation, we've been angry at everybody. We've been wanting to cut poor people, not my tax dollars. We've been persecuting the immigrants, and deporting them and being draconian and evil and harsh about it, immoral and even unconstitutional. And so what we've done is we've still continued doing the regular evils that we've always done, that every nation probably does. But we've been getting rid of the charity. We've been getting the charity, so that neutral buoyancy that we once had is not there. So we don't have that balance anymore because we're getting rid of the immigrants. We're getting rid of the charities. People don't want them on welfare. We're persecuting even more people who we've been charitable to. So we're losing that neutral buoyancy. And things are beginning to get bad. And now we've involved ourselves in a conflict, with this Middle East conflict with Israel and Iran, and it could simply suck us into a place where we just cannot escape. And we could find ourselves in a very, very bad position. So you say, well, what's my motivation? Why am I doing this? What's this all about, Martin? We just as individuals just need to wake up. We need to begin to walk with our eyes open, is what I call it, and begin to identify good, begin to identify evil, and not buy into things that are not quite right. And who knows, one by one, we might be able to help reestablish that neutral buoyancy just by being right in and of ourselves, if many of us could do this. Don't just buy into a political party's rhetoric on either side simply because that's the side you've been on. No, don't do that. You have to individually determine what is right from wrong. Come on, I don't care if it's your political party, whichever party it is. If it's right, it's right. If it's wrong, it's wrong. Be honest. It's okay. You could still be part of that party, but just say, well, this thing isn't quite right. I remember my mother, she was like a Republican because of the abortion issue. My mother was born in 1920. She was old, but when Obama ran for president, she voted for him. And she said, I voted for him. The one thing I hate is this abortion thing, but I voted for him because he's a black man. Because of what she experienced, what she saw in her life, having been born in 1920. So sometimes we got to look at situations and judge. Everything can't be right. So what we're looking for, what is the more right to do versus over here the more right or the more wrong to do. We have to make decisions like that. Don't just support a party because it's your party. What individual things are they embracing, and can you call them out on it even if that's your party? That is your moral right, and you will help bring back that neutral buoyancy, because right now we're on the way to some serious reaping. But each of us as individuals could make choices in and of ourselves just to do right, to be right. Don't call what is evil good, and don't call what is good evil. If people are fighting for the side of the oppressed, don't demonize those people. You need to join them. Maintain whatever party you want to be a part of, but always be on the side of the oppressed. Be on the side of even the immigrant. Come on now. There's always this quid pro quo. The United States doesn't do anything for anybody unless there's a vested interest. Those immigrants that were coming here and working, they were putting billions of dollars into our nation's coffers. And they were doing jobs that other people, Americans, didn't want to do. We have to be very careful about buying into the rhetoric of politicians. All the politicians. Well, on either political party, they're all millionaires, most of them. And if they're not yet, they're going to be. It's a very lucrative business to be a politician, if you're good at it. So we have to begin to look through and recognize truth. It doesn't matter what, I voted for Ronald Reagan once, you know. I mean, I'm just saying, you got to look at the situation. I liked his attitude about the military, because I'm military. That was all that was about. So I'm just saying, we need to begin walking with our eyes open. Don't be fooled, don't be cajoled by quick speaking politicians, judge right from wrong, good from evil. I just say, you know, I don't even call myself political. I'm not a Democrat or a Republican. I just look and vote based on my interest. But personally, I don't claim either party. I can't. How can I claim myself to be a member of a party where I don't believe in everything that they're about? And who does? I think I did that with religion as well. I did that with the martial art as well. You know, I was a martial artist as a young person. I practiced Taekwondo, Okinawan Karate, a couple of Kung Fu's, a little Jiu-Jitsu, a little Judo. But so I guess I wasn't loyal to a particular style then either, you know. But I think that's how I am as far as the politics are concerned. But just begin to judge good from evil. Don't judge. I wouldn't judge Democrat from Republican and just say, well, I'm a Democrat or I'm a Republican no matter what. No, just judge right from wrong. Be whatever you are. But call out your own party if they're doing something that doesn't seem quite right. Because the reality is, if there is reaping and sowing, if there is a thing called karma, if you do, you know, if chickens do come home to roost, you know, we want to be able to subvert, we want to be able to divert some of that away from us to another direction. And I think we all have that vested interest. We want what's best for this country. So let's just not blindly follow any political party, everything they want to do. Let's put their feet to the fire and just make them do right. Whoever's in office, whatever party is in office, make them do right. And make sure there's transparency, because we don't want ourselves getting into stuff that we really wouldn't have agreed to had we known what was happening, okay? Well, anyway, I want to thank you once again for joining me and listening, and I want to invite you to listen again.